Every book has a moment before the page. A decision, a risk, a story worth telling. This is Authors After Action. Conversations with authors about the journey, the work, and the lessons learned along the way.
Welcome, everybody, to Authors After Action. I'm Don, your host, and today we've got Ray Hartjen. Am I saying your last name right, Ray?
You're perfectly correct. Yes.
Okay. A lifelong storyteller whose career in B2B and B2C revenue taught him how powerful narratives truly connect people. Author of 5 books spanning sports, history, business strategy, personal memoir, and resilience, including Stories Shaped by Cancer and Creativity. A musician and writer who turns life lessons into mottos, music, and meaning. A cancer patient advocate whose multiple myeloma diagnosis reshaped his priorities, relationships, and purpose. Someone who believes time is the most valuable currency and refuses to waste it. How you doing, Ray? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Don, man. I appreciate being on here. Thank you so much. And I've been looking forward to our conversation all day. So this is great.
Absolutely. You know, I'm looking forward to this too. My daughter is currently fighting cancer as well. So she's been going through it for the last few years. So I can relate to the ups and downs that has definitely came from it. So.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry to hear that, as I'm sure that you have experienced, through your daughter's battle. One thing I like to really tell patients, particularly when they're newly diagnosed, is that, it's a challenge, right? But you are stronger than you know. When you walk into this, there's so much self-doubt. There's a lot of fear. You're just scared, right? But, the lesson I learned is that you can rise. And you are stronger than you know. And, particularly for someone like you, it also applies to you, the caregiver, Donald. I've met a lot of patients who have been both patients and caregivers. And to the person, they say the toughest role is that of the caregiver. Right. It's, you don't really, as a caregiver, you don't really know what the patient can handle. Right. You don't know where they are at their limit. And there's so much, self-doubt and confusion and the like. So, definitely, with your daughter, reinforce the fact that she's stronger than she knows, but also know that you, Don, are stronger than you know, and make sure that you, that you take the time to understand actually how you're doing. Take care of yourself, because you can't help take care of your daughter if you're falling apart. So, strength to both of you.
I appreciate that. Absolutely. And she has impressed the hell out of me with how strong she is. So, absolutely. So let's get into a little bit of background. What brought in the writing of the book? Where all did writing start for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've always been kind of a storyteller throughout my professional career, whether it was, telling stories. I've been doing organizational assessments as a consultant, either external or within a company's organizational development role. I found that I was telling stories there, and I wanted to tell stories externally to others. So I got involved in marketing, public relations, and everything about that was really kind of a storytelling aspect. So I wrote a lot for different roles within different companies. And I just, felt as though I could write a little bit. And, when starting writing for others, I began with articles, wrote articles on the San Jose Sharks hockey team for Yahoo, for example, and began to do some things like that. But I always wanted to try working on a book. And a friend of mine, he's a Yinzer. He's from, that's what folks from Pittsburgh call themselves. And, he's my age. He's, he's in his 60s. And, he lived through a very turbulent time as a child in the city of Pittsburgh, as, they were facing its, kind of a forced upon itself, a deindustrialization transformation. And Tom always viewed that, the city of Pittsburgh came through this deindustrial transformation, really smelling like a rose compared to its Rust Belt cousins, like those in Buffalo and Cleveland. And like they're still Detroit. They're still trying to work their way through, being industry focused. And in his mind, it was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yep. When the city needed its heroes, they found them in this unlikely place, because for 39 years the Steelers have been horrible. And all of a sudden, in 1972, they got a little bit better. And then soon thereafter, they won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. And in his mind, the Steelers kind of galvanized the community to get through the tough times. They looked at their football team as a mirror reflection of themselves. Blue collar, go to work, tough, the types of jobs where you take showers, after work instead of going to before you go to work, right? So it's, that kind of lunch pail, community, and he talked about this book for decades. Tom is a biotech executive. He's not a writer. I kind of felt as though I was a writer, but just before this point in time, I was diagnosed with cancer. And with my diagnosis in cancer, when I first conversed with you, Don, I talked about some learning experience, a sense of a journey of self-discovery upon my diagnosis. And one of the things that I leaned on was, I looked at a timeline exercise, and as part of this very long answer to Don's first question, I'd like everybody out there in the audience to just follow along with me with this exercise. If you have a pencil and paper, this is great. If you don't, you can just do it in your mind, because it's super easy, right? You just draw a line horizontally from left to right. And then at the left-hand side, you make a little tick mark. Right-hand side, you make another little tick mark. So what you've created is a segment. On the left-hand side, underneath that tick mark, you write the letter B. That's going to represent your birth. Now, you guys are already smarter than me, so you're ahead of me. On the right-hand side, underneath that tick mark, you write the letter D. That represents your death. The introspective part comes when you look at your timeline. This is your time on the planet. Where do you think you are now? We all know intellectually that tomorrow's not promised, but where do you believe in your heart? Where do you think you are on your timeline? So, Don, in part of some of my roles within corporate America, I did training sessions and time management training sessions, and this was a bedrock of that. Looking at this timeline, and whenever I facilitated this for training courses, I would just kind of haphazardly throw my tick mark where I was on my timeline, right in the middle. And I didn't think too seriously about it, because I was going to live to be 100 at least. If I wasn't going to live forever, I was going to live to be 100. So, I just threw it there in the middle. Well, after my diagnosis with multiple myeloma, which is an incurable blood cancer, treatable but incurable blood cancer, I being intellectually honest with myself, I'm a little further to the right on my timeline than I felt I was before. So I looked at that and I said, what does that mean to me? And right away, it jumped to me, Don, that like a lot of human beings, I think I've been too guilty in the past of taking time for granted. I would take all tomorrows for granted, next week's for granted, and the like, right? And so, I as a musician, I'm always looking for a pithy little saying to put on the back of a T-shirt to make more money at a gig, right? And it dawned on me a motto: if not now, when? If not now, when? Fast forward back to my friend Tom and his idea for a book. Decades he's been talking about it with his family. For me, about 15 years he's been talking about the length of my relationship with him. I grabbed him by the corner of each shoulder, and I just kind of shook him a little bit and said, "Hey, Tom, if not now, when? I mean, you're talking about something that happened 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Let me start writing. And if I ever veer off of your vision, we'll course correct. But it's a lot easier to course correct when we're moving, as opposed to overcoming the inertia of having even started yet, right?"
Yeah.
About 18 months later, Don, my first book in collaboration with Tom came out. It's called Immaculate: How the Steelers Saved Pittsburgh. And it's a book I'm super proud of. I mean, it's been well received by everyone that he's bothered to tell me feedback about it. And it's something that I'm super proud of. But, it all came to, a realization is like, hey, I want to get this done. Tom wants to get this done, but it's never going to get done if we never get started, right? If not now, when? And so one of the things I like to tell, creatives of all sorts, particularly writers, is, don't sweat the fact that you're looking at, this Immaculate's 130,000 words, right? Yeah. don't sweat I mean, I'll never be able to write a 130,000 word book. Don't sweat it, man. How about let's think about the first 250 words, right?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
start it. And, most books aren't 130,000 words. Most books are around, 60 to 75,000 words. At 500 words a day, you have a book done in a short period of time. So get started. Don't get freaked out about the end. Instead, get excited about the beginning.
Yeah. You said some really key parts there, and some of those things referred back to me of what I did with my first book. Some of the mistakes that I made, when I first started writing, I did, I don't know if what everybody did, but I went to Google and I said, I'm going to write this book. What does my format look like? How am I supposed to write it? And it gave me all of these, I don't know, to me, they were kind of BS criteria, right? You should pick a set time and write every day. You should, if you're going to write a novel, it should have X number of words. Your chapters should be X number of distances. And what I realized was that's a guideline. Those are your rails, and it worked better the second time around and the third time around, because I learned that it's the message that's important. It's not the necessarily of how many words or how big your chapters are or any of that type of stuff. Yes, there's things that, are within the industry that you should look at, but the biggest part at the beginning is just writing. Get it down on paper, and you can always go back and fix those criteria things.
Yeah, and as a creative, you should certainly explore. Yeah, you could do things a traditional way, or maybe a non-traditional way. I love looking at some poets, and their collections of poetry, like no capitalization, no punctuation. And it's weird to look at it, but once you kind of get over it and you start, reading the words. I'm reading a book right now. I think it's called The Rest of Our Lives, written by Benjamin somebody. The name escapes me. But the first chapter on my Kindle said it was like an hour and 35 minutes long. And it was about an hour and 35 minutes long. I'm reading it electronically, so I don't know the book, but those are some pretty long chapters, man. But I love, the creative aspect of putting, words together. You see it all the time in songs, man. You see the traditional format of a song is verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, and you're done, right? But then you get something like Elton John's Tiny Dancer, completely different, right? And that's one of the best songs ever written, right? And so you think about breaking out of the box and doing things, and again, it's your message that counts, writers out there. Don't sweat too much on the fine details. Just get the words on the page, and you can format it out however you want. Write it in the sky with an airplane or whatever. Just get the message out, get the story.
Absolutely. So that kind of transitions into my next question, right? We're talking the message is what's important. What makes a story actually stick with people? When you're writing that message, what is some of the things you want to focus on so that I get my message across and people can resonate with it?
That's a great question, which is why you do this, right? So it's a great question. I think you want to be engaging, and you want to engage your audience, and I think it depends on what your message is and what type of format that you're creating. If you're creating a memoir, my second book is a cancer patient memoir. It's called Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma. And it's intended to be a resource for patients, caregivers, and allies. And I can't begin to be a resource for those three types of readers without being completely honest about my health, right? I can't sugarcoat some things or avoid some topics or whatever. I've got to be genuine, right? And so I think if you're writing a memoir type of thing or something along those lines, it's certain that authenticity and the being genuine, being honest, and if it's about particularly about your health, I mean, you just have to throw the kimono open and this is it, and it can be uncomfortable for some folks, So to try to overcome that, as it relates to maybe some other genres, particularly like in fiction, you just want to be able to be engaging, and I think follow along with interests. I recently wrote my first fiction book because I wanted to present a challenge to myself, and I kind of wanted to write the types of books that I like to read. I like like espionage thrillers and I wanted to write an espionage thriller, a military type of thriller. And I also wanted to do it, very specifically in a Tom Clancy type of way, kind of nerd out on some of the technical details, the equipment, the tactics and the like. But as you know, Don, people don't tend to read those types of books anymore. I mean, a Tom Clancy book was something that you didn't get done on a weekend, right? This was like weekend beach reading. This was like a couple of weeks of like really bearing into it. And, a lesson that I learned by going to publishers with Immaculate, How the Steelers Saved Pittsburgh, was, we immediately, our publisher, Morgan James, is like, book is too long, 132,000 words. Nobody reads those books anymore. And I picked up a copy on my desk at the time. It was a copy of Tolstoy's War and Peace. I'm like, look at this. This is 1,000 pages long. It's a classic. And they're like, you're absolutely right. Historical classic, the, preeminent Russian novel. Nobody buys War and Peace. You have it, but when did you buy it? And I'm like, no, true. I bought it like 25 years ago. It goes, thanks to USA Today, we're used to what we want to read is, 3 paragraphs and a pie chart. That's just how people are, right? And so we fought with them about the Pittsburgh Steelers book, and we did narrow it down. The book took the manuscript took a slight diet from 132,000 words to 130,000 words. But still, it's a pretty big book, right? Yeah. So, wanting to have my novel being digestible, I wanted it to be, the right size. It's less than 300 pages long. I think it's maybe 65,000 words. But I wanted to write it out with those types of details, and hopefully it's engaging and appealing to readers, interesting. It's maybe not for everybody. If you don't like thrillers, I don't think you'd like my novel Outflanked. But if you do like thrillers, it's available wherever you buy your books. So if I give it a shot, let me know what you think.
Absolutely, and leave a review. That's what I like to tell everybody. They seem to forget that part of the step.
And I give away a lot of books with a caveat: leave your authentic review. I'm not pandering for 5 stars. I want to know, and other readers want to know. My wife Lori. When she's shopping for almost anything, she pretty much goes to reviews first, right? Yeah. It really helps consumers, really helps readers. Anything that you read out there, folks, leave a review and maybe leave it at multiple spots. Even at places you don't buy the book from. Leave the review on Amazon, Goodreads. Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, whatever. It helps the writer, and it certainly helps future readers decide whether they're going to read it. And reviews also help trip algorithms, right? Yep. So, it helps the retailer know, like, oh, this is a real book. People are actually reading it, and it will start tripping and showing up in search, which helps the writer.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. And again, like you said, that's, who wants to keep reading a book from somebody that keeps making the same mistake that could have been fixed by a simple review? Yeah. All that person sees without a review is somebody's buying my book. Somebody's buying my book. Yeah. And at the end of the day, your next project may not sell like that because you didn't know what you did wrong the last time. Yeah. And so, I get it. Absolutely.
Yeah. As a creative out there, take your look at your reviews, but also, there's a little bit of a, grain of salt that goes with them. I know there is a 1-star review amongst the reviews that I have for me, myself, and my multiple myeloma on Amazon. I'm like, dude, 1 star? That's it. I mean, I have cancer. Can I play the cancer card on you at least? Can I get 2 or 3 stars? Thankfully, the book has I think it's like 4.6, 4.7 on average. So it's still well received. But come on, dude, heartless, man, 1. But it happens, right?
Yep. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, I know when I look at reviews, I kind of, that guy that left that 50-page review about how great it was and how perfect it was, I discontinue and I throw that aside. And then the one that left, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I do the same thing there. And I'm focused with where is the majority. I want to know what the middle thinks, because that's where you're going to find the honesty at.
Yeah. And we do that a lot in, data analysis, take the outliers off,
Yep.
The bottom 2%, the top 2%, what have you. Let's focus on kind of more of that standardized distribution and that bell-shaped curve, right?
Yep, absolutely. So with this book that you wrote with your cancer diagnosis, I know when I wrote my first book, it was about my time in the military and dealing with PTSD and that type of stuff. I struggled when I went back through and had to do the editing process because of having to reread these same things over that I really wasn't ready to kind of be able to handle over and over again. I was still healing.
Yeah.
With this book, did you have any of that kind of same things where you found yourself going back and rereading it going, man, things have gone so long and I've been dealing with this, this way and so forth. Did some of those feelings come back?
Yeah, they did. I think, I don't know if it'd be trauma. I am hesitant to put my situation to be similar to yours. I don't think it was so much a trauma. And it was just like they weren't the best of times, and
Right.
things I had to revisit, right? And so I don't know. I don't consider myself to have experienced like and have a post-traumatic stress type of reaction to my early stage of treatment. My wife can tell you differently about herself. Very specifically, my first bone marrow biopsy, which, the test has a reputation that precedes it, and it's not a particularly good one, right?
Yeah.
And, she seeing me go through the bone marrow biopsy, for those of you who are not familiar with it, you cannot anesthetize bone, all right? So the way you get a bone marrow biopsy, you take a, fairly big gauge needle and you jab it into your hip bone, which is, for most people, there's not a whole lot of meat in between, your skin and your hip bone. You throw it in the back of your hip bone and then you aspirate out bone marrow. It hurts. There's no other way of saying it. You just got to grit your teeth and get through it. That's like 30 seconds of hell. That was very traumatic for Lori. She had to leave the room, right? And she has not been back for any of my other bone marrow biopsies. For me, writing the book, I had to revisit that. I can't brush over the bone marrow biopsy for new patients and for
Right.
caregivers and allies, right? So, revisiting that, it was uncomfortable. Going through my stem cell transplant and the heavy doses of chemotherapy that just made me ill. What it did for my stem cell, it destroyed my bone marrow completely.
Yeah.
Wiped it out, right? And so, that set the stage for them to reintroduce my stem cells, and then so they could find, shiny, clean bones to then build new bone marrow. But for 11, 12 days waiting for engraftment, the only blood cells and platelets I had in my body were the blood cells and platelets that were there before I started the 3 rapid rounds of chemotherapy, and I ended up having to get a couple of blood transfusions, had to be hospitalized. That none of that was fun. It did have to be revisited. It was, kind of difficult to get it out, but I felt as though it was part of my mission, right? I needed to be honest with the book. I needed to be authentic with the book. And so, I had to relive it. And, I've had some comments from readers saying like, hey, this is, kind of scary. I'm like, but then I get back to the strength message. Yeah, I got through it. And if you have to go through a stem cell transplant or something like that, you can get through it too. I know you can handle it. You're stronger than you know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you for that, because it is 100%. When you first decide to write about something that's happened in your life, especially on the nonfiction side, and then you go back in, there's so many steps to writing a book that you're not going to realize how it's going to play with your story. And that was one of the things that I didn't take into consideration when I first started, was how many times I was going to have to relive and re-talk about these things over. But at the end of the day, after it was all said and done and the book was published and everything else, I'm stronger for that. And I think that's the cool part about writing a book like that, is you heal from it. It makes you stronger for it. and at the same time, you're helping somebody else who's reading it. So
Yeah, with a little luck, there's some catharsis going through the journey again. But it probably doesn't feel that way when you're halfway
right.
through the journey again.
Yeah.
And particularly in an editing type of process, it's multiple times. You don't just edit once and it goes away. You edit again and again. At the very end, there's a proofread. Like, is this final? And you're reliving it and reliving it and reliving it. And you certainly in the midst of it in the journey, it can be problematic and traumatic again. But thanks for, thankfully for you and for me as well, able to work through it, kind of have that cathartic type of response at the end and move forward.
So with the amount of books that you wrote and the different topics and the wide range, we talked about your nonfiction book with the cancer, and now your fiction book with spies and everything else. How is it that you keep your mindset together, and do you focus one topic at a time or one subject at a time and then move through these projects, or where does these ideas come from that you go to the next? I mean, because these are wide ranges of topics.
Yeah, they are.
This episode is brought to you by Barracks Media, where your online presence becomes a real asset. Barracks Media builds professional websites for podcasters, creators, authors, and small businesses who are ready to be taken seriously. Not templates, not cookie-cutter pages, real platforms built to grow with you. Whether you're launching a podcast, promoting a book, or building a brand, your website should work as hard as you do. We design sites that convert listeners into followers and followers into clients. Visit barracksmedia.com and turn your idea into a home on the web.
And, part of it is, I'm a freelance marketing consultant as well. So, I'm working on 3 different projects right now. Because of how well received Outflanked, my novel, has, the reviews it's gotten so far and the reader feedback, I decided to write another one, and I'm really close to a sequel to it. I'm really close to finishing it. So awesome. I'm pretty excited about that. I also have a couple of nonfiction projects related around marketing. One's about hybrid marketing. And the other one is actually around interview fraud in the age of AI and technology. Those are projects that I'm collaborating with some others on that, I try to break my time up. I can tell you right now that, while, there's maybe more for me professionally to be made from the nonfiction books, my energy and my focus is really around the sequel to my novel. And today I punched out 1,199 words because, yes, I count them every day to try to get to my goal. And today it was 1,199. And, that takes up a big part of my energy. But trying to juggle those is different. In one area, when I get excited about a book project, one area that falls short is songwriting. Sometimes, so like most of December, I didn't even pick up a guitar. And that's at other times of my life, that would be a very weird type of thing to say that, for pretty much a month, I didn't pick up a guitar. It's,
Yeah.
There'd be other days, other times when, it wouldn't be just even a couple of hours. Right. So yeah. Juggling your interests, my interests, and the topics and what I want. I mean, there's only so much energy, and as a patient, is undergoing active chemotherapy. I take a nap nearly every day, Don. Right? I gotta have my nap time in and stuff like that. So finding the time is always a bit of a struggle, but it's a constant struggle to try to allocate the resources, which is my head, my fingertips. What project needs some more care and feeding right now.
Has any of that stuff that's been going on as far as being able to figure out how to allocate all these assets, does that change the mindset for how you attack a project, or even performing music or any of those types of things?
Well, sometimes it's I think guilt. Right. It's like I haven't given enough attention to this. I need to, boom, here's 2 hours to work with a client on something. I'm going to get this done. And then, I'll work on that out of almost a feeling of guilt. Like I need to get this done. And I'm neglecting it. So let's do some of this and get to the point. But then I find myself, guilt for my pet project. Now I gotta, play catch up on that. I just spent, a couple hours working on a client now. So I think for me, it might be a little bit of, might be just good old feelings of guilt. Like, hey, let's get this done. I'm also a guy that as you can tell from me, counting the number of words that I wrote today, I like setting goals. I like, metricizing and measuring my progress toward goals. And I'm very kind of goal oriented. So that's another thing that I like to do is, so if I need to get a project done, let's look at the timeline. When's my desired completion date? Let's set a backwards timeline to get to it. What do I need to do, today to get to where I need to be a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 months from now, or whatever, and then break that down, and then force myself measure my progress toward that goal.
Yeah, I'm the same way as far as I don't like leaving things unfinished, and I think two things that I use is one, I enjoy pushing myself to be uncomfortable and getting out of my comfort zone. And two, I don't like to leave things unfinished.
This show is part of the Barracks Media Network, built by veterans, creators, and storytellers who believe stories change lives. Barracks Media produces podcasts, books, and digital content that amplify voices worth hearing. We help creators launch, grow, and monetize their message without losing their soul. If you've got a story in you or a show in your head, go to barracksmedia.com and start building something that lasts.
So I am one of those guys that when I start something, I like to see it finished. I then like to take a moment and stand back and say, it's done. I did it and it's completed, and then move on to my next project.
I'm a little bit different, actually. I think, when you're, I do love finishing things, but I think I like getting started more than I like finishing. There's like this excitement around getting started with a project, and you have these, delusions of grandeur. Like, man, I'm going to work like 36 hours straight, have 17 pots of coffee, and just get so excited about just getting started on something. But I do like finishing. But I think there are some people out like me that get kind of like 95% of the way through something, right? Then it's the last little bit. It's just like hunker down, get it done. But for me, I get a big charge mentally, emotionally out of getting started on something. I can, really, kind of rub my hands together, really kind of like dig into it.
Yeah. It's funny you said that because I can relate to that. Even though I am one of those guys that once I started, I like to make sure I see it through and get finished. Yesterday, I don't know where the idea or the desire even came from, but, I was interviewing a guest and she kept talking about film and movies and her book and so forth. And, I was just sitting there thinking, man, I really enjoy playing around with AI and the one thing I have not seen yet, I've seen AI music videos. I've seen people use AI to do advertisements and so forth. I started last night taking one of my books, a fiction book that I wrote, and taking the chapters and using AI to make a movie out of it and make a series out of it. I don't know where it's going to go, but man, I was definitely excited about it last night, and I definitely lost sleep because I stayed up way too late to work on it.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because I have those same thoughts going through my head about Outflanked, and very specifically in the style. Have you seen Splinter Cell on Netflix? Very much like that. So can I query up an AI engine to produce basically a cartoon using my book and my script, right? And that's something that I've got super excited about. I haven't started it yet, but if I do, I can imagine myself, sitting here in my home studio for, like 14 hours straight, forgetting to eat and drink and all those other things.
Yeah. Well, that's where I was last night. I'm not going to lie. And
did you get much done?
So I did get the first half of the first series done. So I'm keeping on.
I like it so far. You happy?
Yeah, I really am. It is challenging as well because I'm one of those detailed guys. So my book that I'm referring to is a combat book. It talks about a Army Ranger medic and the constantly redeploying and his times deployed, and the camaraderie with the troops and everything. So I didn't think about that part of it, about when I started creating the scene of Marcus and Murphy sitting there talking in the motor pool before their deployment and just making military jokes back and forth, how hard it would be to keep the backgrounds and the environment around them stable so that it doesn't change, because it's not like a studio stage where you can build it and then put your actors in it and do it. Now I'm trying to build the background, and then over a period of scenes, not allowing that background to change. And, there was times like I would flip from one segment to the next, and all of a sudden I'd realize that randomly the guys changed clothes and they're not wearing the same outfits no more. And I'm like, that does not make any sense.
No.
This has all been the fun part of it.
Sure.
These are the challenges with it that I've found and I've enjoyed. So, yeah.
Let me know when you distribute it. I'm dying to see the finished product. It's going to be cool.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So let's kind of dig into a little bit about some advice for, say, new authors and new people that are getting out there. What is it that you would like to share with somebody that wants to get their first book out there and get started?
Yeah, you'll hear a lot of things, and you brought up one of them when you were, looking at, researching, like, hey, Google, help me write my first book, and there's a lot of folks out there that, that say, like, hey, pick a, you need a space, you need a writing space. When you sit there, you're like a writer. It's like your bed. That's where you sleep. This place is where you eat. This is where you write. I hotel it, right? I move around for different spots, just where I just want to be at a particular time. So, I can write 3-4 different times in a day. So I don't worry too much about that. I worry about, like, when do you write? And, there's a lot of times that writers will give you advice, just, you have to, first thing in the morning, and I like that idea. You can get a lot done there, right? If 250, 500 words a day isn't a lot, right? And sometimes you can fire that up with your avocado bagel and your double cappuccino, right? And by the time you're done, you've got a little bit done. So those are kind of like, some things for you to consider. Do you need a place? Do you need a particular time? For me, it's just all about overcoming the inertia and getting stuff to write. And sometimes for me, I need to take a walk. I like to write organically, and I don't use an outline, right? And so, what do I want to talk about next? What makes sense for the reader next, right? And whether it's I'm creating it in my mind through a work of fiction, or if it's telling a nonfiction story, but what makes sense, what comes next, and how am I going to present this? Sometimes I need to take a walk. Sometimes I need to, I need time just to think about it, right? So I can't it doesn't work for me to say, like, at 8:30 every morning, I'm going to become a writer and write, because I might need some story time in my head right now.
Oh,
right?
I get it.
Yeah. So, my advice for to, experiment and find out what works for you, because you will find the magic formula that works for you. But the most important thing is you just have to start, and you have to kind of like trust the process and work your way through it. At a 60,000 word, a 60,000 word manuscript for, kind of like the average type of, fiction book, at 500 words a day, it's 120 days, right? Just knock it down. And 500 words a day is not a lot if you are a writer, right? You can do this, right? So you just get started. Don't get overwhelmed thinking about the end result. Think about just getting started and continuing to work. And then when you finally get done with your manuscript, know that you're not finished. You've just started, right? You finish your manuscript, but as a writer, it's more important to get it out into the hands of readers, man. Is that the journey begins with the book, right? And there's lots of different ways that you can publish. I can tell you right now, unless you're already a celebrity, a traditional publisher is not going to do a lot of work for you, right? If you're Michelle Obama, they're going to do a lot of promotion on a book. If you're Ray Hartjen, Putnam's they publish 20,000, nonfiction books a year. They have time to promote 3 or 4 a month. One of my books is not going to be one of those 3 or 4, right?
Right.
And I can even see that with my publisher for 3 of my books being Morgan James. Just know there's a lot of work as a writer to market and promote your book to get it into the hands of readers. So consider the different choices that you have to publish, but also keep in mind that, self-publishing is not a bad thing. Don't view it as vanity press, right? If you're doing all the work anyway, and promoting and marketing your book, you might as well reap the lion's share of the benefits of it as well. So consider the wide variety of publishing that you can, which is, traditional publishing, self-publishing, and in between is just hybrid publishing. In my opinion, almost everything is hybrid publishing. Really, we've kind of all merged together in the middle. But think about the publishing options, and then get out there and tell people about your books. Talk to Don, for example, and plug your books and say things like available wherever fine books are sold. And
absolutely. And you brought up a really good point there. I don't look at either side of that to be bad as far as the type of publishing, whether it be traditional or self-publishing. They both have benefits.
Oh yeah.
Right? And they both have negatives. Like you said, don't think that the small guy like Don Dunn is going to walk into a publisher and they're going to say, oh yeah, we're going to do this. And here's your check for $35,000 for your advance on your contract, because this is going to be a big seller. That's not going to happen. It's the same way in the music industry. Mm-hmm. It's the same way in the podcasting industry. I've seen a lot of deals come out of the music industry at like 95.5, and that's not 95 for the artist. That's 95 for the signing company, and you're making the minimum wage there. Yeah. But on the other side, you got the self-publishing, like you said, and I think this is where a good, honest assessment of yourself and your ability to want to be able to put in some work. If you go that route, you're going to reap the benefits, but you are going to put the work in, because your reach now is massively small compared to some of these bigger companies. Right. Yeah. And so
like you said, there are pros and cons to both. And, and you will find, you as the writer out there in the audience, you will find the one that works for you, and it might change over time. So for me, I have 3 published books with Morgan James and 2 self-published books. One of them, in fact, is Kindle Direct only. The other one I used self-publisher, my own imprint called Two Red Chairs Publishing, used Ingram Spark for it. So, at different points, different books, might be different, alternatives for you to consider going.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me ask you this. Where can people follow you and find your books and all that good stuff? I know it's wherever you find your books, but is there like social media places where they can find you and learn about upcoming projects and so forth? Yeah,
I appreciate you asking, Don. You can reach me. Anybody can reach me at my website. My website is my name, rayhartjen.com. It's also my handle on all my social media platforms, with the exception of TikTok. Then it's my name and the number 5. And I'm not really sure. I think maybe I just got a little excited with my thumbs when I was signing up or whatever. Right. So I love hearing your stories, particularly if you're a cancer patient, a caregiver, or an ally. If there's ever anything I can do for you, please reach out and help. My email address is rayhartjen@gmail.com. My phone number is in the book. It's been the honor of my life connecting with cancer patients around the world because of the book. I've interacted with patients in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Egypt, Turkey, Iran, of all places, the UK, across the United States. It's been the honor of my life hearing their stories, understanding their journeys, and being whatever little help I can be, even if it's just being a listener. So if there's anything I can do for you out there, viewers and listeners, please reach out to me via the social networks. My name, Ray Hartjen. You can see what else I'm working on. My wife's a big fan of the author Jeremy Robinson. And she told me about his website just earlier this week. She says, you got to go see this website because he's working on multiple projects at a time. And he gives kind of like a thermometer gauge about like, where he is on it. Like, this one's almost done. This was just beginning. This one's in the middle and all that. And I'm like, you need that on your site. I'm like, that's a really cool idea. I don't know how to build that, but yeah, it's a good idea. So maybe by the time this episode gets to publication, I will have kind of revamped my website. You can look at my different projects and see where I am. But I kind of like that. I tell you that I'm a goal-oriented person. One way that you help achieve your goals, is share it with others. You let other people know what your goal is. There's something about it, kind of that ownership and accountability thing, our human nature, that we work a little harder to try to achieve that goal. So I like the idea of putting, things I'm working out, what the status is on them, putting it out there for people to say. So people like you, Don, can hold me accountable when you say, hey, Ray, what about the sequels outflanked? What are you doing here? It's been at 50% for a month. Not good.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you how to build that as soon as this episode's over with. So,
all right.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Ray, I appreciate you coming on, man. I had such a great time, and the things that you're doing for cancer survivors, and the thing you said about even just listening, man, it goes a long ways for a lot of different things, not just cancer survivors. So thank you for what you've done. And thank you for the books that you're putting out, and thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure. And again, my invitation, extends very directly to you as well, you and your daughter. Anything I can do for you, let me know, because I'm there, even if it's just to listen. All right, brother.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Y'all take care. Make sure you go and get his book. Leave the reviews. Don't y'all get lazy on me, man. Don't make me look bad. Y'all leave the reviews and purchase the books, and I promise you will not regret it. So y'all take care, be safe, and we will see you next time.
Take care.
You've been listening to Authors After Action, a podcast from the Barracks Media Network. Thanks to our guest for sharing their story, and thank you for listening. You can explore more conversations like this across the Barracks Media Network. We'll see you next time.